Gabriela Villarreal was a young Argentine girl, just like her peers. She was full of hope for a wonderful and carefree future. She was about to finish high school, but at some point, she simply disappeared without a trace. And subsequent investigations showed that she had a secret romantic relationship with the man who ended her life. Gabriela Diana Villarroel was born in 1998 in Argentina. She was the daughter of a married couple of Bolivian origin. When she was only 6 years old, her parents decided to separate. Since then, she was raised by her mother, Liliana Chambi, and father Cesar Garcia. In addition, Gabriela had a younger sister, Sunilda, with whom she had a wonderful and trusting relationship, and also two younger brothers. According to some information, her large family lived in a spacious house located in an area called Villa Lugano. According to those who knew Gabriela personally, she was a quiet and perhaps even withdrawn girl who never went to parties and preferred to remain invisible. Perhaps that is why she avoided unnecessary attention and did not wear too revealing clothes. While Gabriela was not alien to simple teenage rebellion, and she quite often entered into arguments with her parents and grandmother on her mother's side, it seemed that with age it was much more difficult for her to tolerate the atmosphere that reigned in the house. Once the girl even ran away from home with her younger sister, then they briefly settled in the house of a woman named Marisol, who was their aunt on their father's side. It is known that even then Gabriela expressed a desire to move in with her biological father. Perhaps she was simply looking for a way out of the current situation, and it seemed to her that in this way she could escape from regular conflicts with her relatives. However, her father did not share her desire, and by that time he had his own family and his own problems. It was against this emotional background that Gabriela finished her studies in the last year of high school. While the unstable financial situation of her family forced the girl to look for opportunities to pay for her subsequent studies at university. At that time, neither she nor her sister had permanent access to the internet, so they often had to go to the nearest internet cafe located several kilometers from their home. And so on Friday, July 29th, 2016, what at first glance seemed like a routine ultimately became a tragic turn in the life of Gabriela and her family. Leaving home in the afternoon with her sister to go to the aforementioned internet cafe, Gabriela abruptly changed her plans. Before reaching the place, the girl told her sister that she would wait for her boyfriend, with whom they apparently agreed to meet. To everyone's surprise, just a few hours later, Gabriela's boyfriend appeared on the threshold of her house and asked her mother if she knew where the girl was now. Literally, all of Gabriela's relatives assumed that they were together, and so they immediately thought that something bad could have happened to her. In fact, the girl disappeared being just a few blocks from her home, and the last known person who saw her alive was her 14-year-old sister. The first guesses about the possible location of the girl were connected with her father. This is not surprising, given the fact that Gabriela always wanted to live with him and in the past had already hidden with his relatives. However, the girl's aunt on her father's side immediately stated the opposite. According to her, Gabriela did not come to her over time. The girl's relatives began to be overcome with anxiety. They feared for her safety and thought that she could have been kidnapped for some unspecified purpose. As a result, Gabriela's mother decided that she should contact the police. At the time of filing a report on the disappearance of the girl, her mobile phone was still working. Moreover, she even maintained some activity on social networks right up until Friday evening. In connection with this, Gabriela's relatives made several attempts to contact her through private messages on one of her accounts. And despite that all these messages were read, there was no response from Gabriela. The next morning, the girl's relatives, as well as other concerned people, went out to look for her. They all tried to do everything possible to find Gabriela alive. Meanwhile, the authorities had already contacted Marisol, Gabriela's paternal aunt, to request information about her possible whereabouts. When they finally managed to find the man, he immediately decided that the whole thing was another hoax. Since over the past few days he had been told various conflicting news, it is difficult to say what exactly the man was talking about. However, when he showed up at the police station, he really looked disoriented and did not have any important information about the whereabouts of his daughter. However, during a series of interrogations conducted by the authorities with both Gabriela's sister and members of her family, some information appeared, leading to a person who most likely met her on the day of her disappearance. And only after that, information appeared that in the past, Gabriela was seen walking hand in hand with this same person. So one of her neighbors said that a few months ago, she saw a girl on a bus sitting on the lap of this man, and when she asked if it was her new boyfriend, she replied that it was her uncle. Apparently, no one had talked about it before because of possible fears for their lives. In the end, the authorities focused their attention only on this man. They quickly established the location of the man. His identity really astounded the rest of Gabriella's relatives. This is not surprising, because he was indeed her uncle, a man named Nestor Quintana. According to available data, he was born on August 18, 1986 in the city of Alvear, Argentina. At the time of Gabriella's disappearance, he was still married to a woman named Elizabeth Chambi, is Gabriella's aunt on her mother's side. It is important to note that Nestor was a lance corporal of the so-called National Police and served in the Argentine Naval Prefecture. According to rumors, shortly before these events, he and his wife lived in the same house as Gabriella. But after separating from his wife, Nestor moved to a small room in a boarding house located nearby from the missing girl's house. Having come to the attention of the authorities, Nestor was questioned at least several times, and since his testimony kept contradicting each other, the overall tension grew noticeably. Nevertheless, after each new interrogation, the man was released. Perhaps this was done deliberately. It is rather difficult for me to judge. In any case, the investigation into Nestor continued, and as the authorities found new and at the same time convincing evidence of his guilt, the man's confidence that he would be able to avoid punishment came to nothing. In other words, at some point, Nestor himself began to understand that the truth would soon come out. Besides, the police no longer had any doubts that there was some kind of connection between him and Gabriella that went beyond the usual relationship between an uncle and niece. And given the fact that during interrogations, Nestor's answers were full of inconsistencies, his confession was only a matter of time. For example, when he was asked to provide a mobile phone, he immediately stated that it had been stolen, according to him. During this robbery, 5,000 Argentine pesos were also taken from him, which at that time was equivalent to about $350. Nestor allegedly withdrew this money from an ATM, although he was never able to clarify in which part of the city this happened. In the end, being on the verge of a nervous breakdown, due to constant pressure from the authorities, the man nevertheless confessed to committing the crime. Nestor then declared that he knew where Gabriella was, and also reported that she had already died. It is obvious that for the girl's relatives, who had not lost hope of finding her alive all this time, such a confession became a real test. And since then, the only thing that they were truly interested in was justice. It is known that the crime itself took place in the room of the boarding house that Nestor was renting, as we already know. This boarding house was relatively close to the girl's house and to the place where she had separated from her sister shortly before her disappearance. According to the man, everything happened quite quickly. Allegedly, at a certain moment between him and Gabriella, there was a conflict as a result of which he took her life. In order to confirm Nestor's version, the authorities went to the alleged crime scene. Having got into the man's room, late in the evening of August 2nd, 2016, they found a simply horrific picture. The lifeless body of Gabriella was still lying right on the floor, wrapped in a sheet and 4 garbage bags glued together with tape. It seemed as if Nestor did everything necessary to get rid of the body. He just did not have time to do it. Later, a mobile forensic group appeared in the boarding house and immediately began to establish the possible cause of the girl's death. By that time, the police already had their own hypothesis about the nature of the crime. However, the reality turned out to be somewhat different in any case. Almost no one could imagine that such a cruel act could be committed by one of Gabriella's relatives. Cesar Garcia, the stepfather of the deceased girl, was also noticeably shocked during his communication with representatives of the media. For him, as well as for other relatives of Gabriella, what happened to her was a real shock, because during the time that Nestor lived with him under the same roof, there were never any special problems between him and the girl, and their relationship seemed quite ordinary. Marisol, Gabriella's aunt, who had been helping with the investigation all this time, was shocked by this outcome. She said that up until his arrest, Nestor had not aroused any particular suspicions in her, but the true motive for his actions remained in the shadows, and perhaps this peculiar secret only increased their shared suffering. It seemed that none of Gabriella's family members knew or believed that they had some kind of secret relationship with their uncle, which, moreover, began back when Nestor lived with her aunt. while according to the man himself, it was his secret relationship with the girl that became the main reason for his separation from his wife. Allegedly, for this reason, he rented a room not far from the house in which the girl and her relatives lived. Surprisingly, after some time, the connection between Nestor and Gabriella was confirmed by her younger sister. According to her, their relationship was always bad, and the girl every now and then became a victim of gender aggression on the part of the man. In fact, she knew of at least several such episodes that included both acts of jealousy and acts of physical aggression. In addition, the girl reported that there were several audio recordings on Gabriella's mobile phone that also indicated that Nestor beat her, according to Gabriella's sister. Their conflicts noticeably intensified after she began dating her new boyfriend. Allegedly, this could have been the trigger that provoked the murder. As for the results of the forensic examination, they showed that Gabriella's death was the result of mechanical asphyxia, that is, strangulation with hands, according to experts. The crime most likely occurred on Sunday morning. Such a conclusion indicated that the girl was alive for more than a day after her actual disappearance. Upon learning of the results of the forensic examination, the girl's relatives, as well as her friends and other concerned people, went to the police station to demand justice for Gabriella. By that time, some difficulty had already appeared in the investigation of this case. It turned out that Nestor's previous confession, which he made during the interrogation, had no legal force, since it was never confirmed in court. This circumstance left the investigation in a somewhat suspended state and increased the anxiety of those who hoped to achieve justice for the victim. And it must be said that all these fears were not unfounded, since soon Nestor retracted his testimony. In fact, the man stated that he took responsibility for the crime only because he was tired of the constant pressure from the police officers. According to him, from the very beginning, he insisted on being provided with a lawyer, but the police officers all the time refused him this opportunity. However, even despite the fact that Nestor retracted his initial testimony, the authorities had very convincing evidence and testimony confirming his involvement in the crime. Among them, for example, was the fact that Gabriella's body was found exactly where he indicated. In connection with this, in March 2018, Nestor finally appeared in court. Shortly before that, the criminal prosecutor's office had officially charged him with murder, with a double aggravating circumstance related to the fact that he was related to the victim, as well as regular acts of gender aggression against her. In addition, the prosecutor's office representatives made it clear that in their opinion, Nestor's involvement in the crime had already been proven, in addition to the girl's body, which as we already know was found in Nestor's room. The authorities also found traces of the man's DNA under Gabriella's fingernails. While it is important to note that for the prosecution, Nestor's lack of a criminal record was a kind of mitigating circumstance, and no matter how much they wanted, but by law the man did not deserve the most severe punishment. However, Gabriella's age and her trust in the man, the state in which her body was found, as well as Nestor's affiliation with the security forces, were sufficient grounds to request a life sentence for him. As for the opinion of Gabriella's parents' lawyer, Mariella Mancelli, she obviously agreed with this decision. In her initial statement, she spoke about the fact that this crime should be proven with the strongest possible evidence. In her opinion, the evidence showed that on Friday, July 29, 2016, Nestor called Gabriella and asked her to meet, after which he took the girl to his room in the boarding house and after some time took her life. In addition to this, Mariella referred to various witness statements, which usually spoke of cruel treatment, persecution, and bullying on the part of Nestor. All of this was confirmed by the fact that the man could not come to terms with the fact that the girl decided to end their relationship, while Mariella emphasized the method of deprivation of life mentioned in the official conclusion of the forensic medical examination. According to her, all this allowed us to conclude that the man was excessively cruel. In addition to this, the woman mentioned that, in this case, it was precisely a deliberate crime, since Nestor took Gabriella to a place where she simply could not resist him properly. In turn, Nestor's defense, headed by a lawyer named Jorge Guillermo Campora, claimed that during the investigation, absolutely all the main guarantees of the man's safety were violated. In addition, according to Jorge, Nestor was incapable of making truly conscious statements in such a psychological state. In other words, the lawyer insisted that his client made a confession, being under strong psychological pressure and coercion from the authorities. In connection with this, Jorge demanded that all the results of the investigation, as well as the evidence obtained during the forensic medical examination and the search of the crime scene, be annulled. In addition to this, the lawyer noted that DNA of another man was also found on Gabriella's body. Based on this, he proposed to conduct another investigation to establish his identity, as well as his possible involvement in the crime, and thus dispel any doubts. Jorge finally questioned the legal qualification of this crime. However, the court did not grant any of the defense's motions, and just 1 month after the start of the main trial, Nestor Quintana was found guilty of committing double aggravated murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Later, the National Criminal Court of Cassation confirmed this sentence. Without a doubt, this case has once again revived the current debate on the need to introduce stricter and more effective measures to protect women who are victims of gender aggression on a daily basis. In addition, this case highlights the alarming problem associated with the objectivity of the assessment of candidates who apply for jobs in the security forces, since many of them in fact pose a danger to society.